Hello, welcome to my channel. My name is Emily. This is my channel, Books for Life. If you haven't subscribed to my channel, please make sure you hit the button down below. So today I'm filming. I haven't filmed a video in over a month. I just didn't want to. I really needed to take a break, I guess, from BookTube. I didn't even know I needed to take a break. I just kept finding myself not interested in filming or editing or even watching BookTube. Originally, I was really excited for the reading rush, and I have had no interest. I haven't watched a single video. I had planned to hold TBR. I didn't film it. I didn't do any of that. So for those of you who do consistently watch my channel, I'm sorry that I took a hiatus, but I do think things like that are needed once in a while. But I'm back. I'm hoping to be consistently back, but I can't make a promise like that. I definitely will be. I am going to film like 4 videos or 5 videos today, so you'll have those coming, but hopefully I'll be able to like keep this momentum going. So that was a really long intro, and I am actually going to finish talking about the books that I read in June. I have a part 1 up already that's been up for weeks. I talked about some of the books I read, I think, in the first few weeks. I think I talked about 6 books, so hopefully I'm accurate. I didn't go back and check, but I think in the first part I talked about Mistborn, A Discovery of Witches, Golden Sun, which is the second book in the Red Rising series, Call It What You Want, Beach Read by Emily Henry, The Perfect Couple by Elin Hildenbrand, and I think that was it. So the next book that I read was an audiobook, and this was Evie Drake Starts Over, and this was a cute book. It's about this woman, and you start with her in her car, and she has decided that she's leaving her husband, and she just can't take it anymore. She's done. She's over it. She's been over the relationship for a long time, and this is it. She like marked a date on her calendar weeks ago, and she was like, okay, by this date, I am done. And as it kept getting closer, she kept getting like more excited and kept feeling like more relieved. So she knew she was making the right choice. So on the day, she like packs up her car, gets in, and as she gets in the car, she gets a phone call from the hospital saying that her husband was in a terrible accident. And so she immediately goes to the hospital and he has died. So now everyone is treating her like a widow who is in mourning, and she's not. Like, she's sad that he's dead because she didn't want to see him die, but she wanted out of that relationship, so she doesn't feel authentic, and she doesn't feel like she can accept the well wishes from people, that she can really do any of those things that she is supposed to do to move on, because she is so guilt-ridden that she was about to leave him, and no one knows that. So then there's another main character, and it is a famous baseball player. Specifically, he's a pitcher, and for some reason he's lost his throw. He can't throw anymore, and he like moves temporarily to her hometown, and she has like a mother-in-law suite that's like just off the house, and her best friend, which is also his best friend, has suggested that he pays rent, and because she's like struggling to make ends meet on her house, and so he's like trying to get up like and move on from his baseball career, and she is trying to move on from her husband dying. It was a cute story. It had some really great funny moments. I gave this 4 stars on Goodreads. That might be a little generous. Maybe 3.5 would have been better, but it was cute. Then I read The Deep by Rivers Solomon, and this was a really interesting read. I think this is the type of book that the more you read it, the more you will get out of it. I think going into it the first time, you're going to be kind of confused, and you're just trying to figure out the world itself and these characters. And I think if you do a reread of it, you're going to get more of the themes and the symbolism, because I think this book is full of lots of really compelling literary elements that you could have a full discussion about. But because I think it was just my first read, I didn't give it 5 out of 5. I give this 4 out of 5 stars. In this story, you have these sea creatures, and I can't properly say the name of what they call themselves. It's like the Warinu, I have no idea. And they are descendants from African slave women that were thrown overboard. So when these African slave women were thrown overboard, they were pregnant and they gave birth in the water, and it was like an amazing instantaneous evolution, and these babies were able to like survive in the water. They had fins, they had gills, they had all the things they needed to be able to survive. And so they created their own little like society below the water. And because the memories of their descendants were so difficult for them, they create a position, and this one is going to be the memory keeper, and she or he will hold all of the memories for the entire community, and then once a year they give the memories back, and the people can like re-experience their history and remember where they came from. So I think the whole concept of this book was really fascinating. I think that there is so much happening that it's a lot to take in at once, and I think this just is a book that you really do need to reread. And I think that you will continue to get more out of it if you do. Then I read Far From the Tree by Robin Benway, and this was an audiobook that I listened to. I gave this one 4 out of 5 stars, and this story focuses on a couple different kids. So you follow these 3 kids, and the first is named Grace, and she is adopted, and she has been an only child her entire life. And then you follow Maya, who is also adopted, and she has grown up in a family full of redheads, and she is a dark brunette, and she's always kind of felt like a misfit, and she's a little bit of a loudmouth. And then you have Jaquan, and he has been through the foster system his entire life, and he has had a very, very different life experience than the other 2 main characters. Turns out all of them share a biological mother. So this is a story about, you know, who is your real family? Is blood thicker than water? Like, what does family mean to you? How do you interact with family members? And you watch these 3 siblings, these 3 blood relatives, as they are complete strangers with very different backgrounds, come together and learn to, you know, love each other and accept each other. And it was a really interesting story. I did enjoy it. I liked how different all 3 siblings' lives were, and I liked how it all like tied together. I gave this one 4 out of 5 stars. Then I read The Falconer by Elizabeth May. Now this is a book that I pulled from my classroom library, and I thought it was interesting. It's like a steampunk historical fiction book. It takes place in Edinburgh in 1844, and you follow this main character, Alina, and she can see fairies. And something traumatic happens, and she ends up becoming a fairy hunter. There's like all these cool inventions, and she's able to do like all these different things. And it was fine. I don't think it was amazing. Definitely very tropey. It's not a book. It's like a series. I think there's 3 books in the series. I have no interest in picking up the other books in the series. If I like find them at a really cheap used bookstore, I would pick them up to add them to my classroom library because maybe someone else would love them. But I was not blown away by this. I definitely thought it had a lot of flaws. I generously gave this 3 stars, although I could have given it only 2. I was really bored while reading it. I didn't want to continue, and this left off on a huge cliffhanger where you should be like, oh, you need to find out what happens, and I'm like, don't really care. Then I listened to Be Not Far From Me by Mindy McGinnis. Now, this was an interesting book because you follow this main character, Ashley. So Ashley and her friends decide to go in the Smoky Mountains for a night of partying in the woods, and she walks in on her boyfriend and another girl. And in a drunken rage, she like runs through the forest and is just gone. And because she's such an avid hiker and she ends up getting lost, she falls off of a ravine and she ends up pretty hurt, and now she's lost. She has no idea where to go or what to do, and she needs to survive. She has no supplies with her, and this is definitely an adventure. Now, I loved Heroine by Mindy McGinnis when I read it last year, so I went into this being like, oh my gosh, I'm going to love this too. And I was not blown away. I'm only giving this 3 out of 5 stars. I felt like it kind of dragged at times, and it's not a story that's going to stick with me. There were some pieces that were a bit mature, and I think like it would be fine for a high school classroom library. I don't know that I would put it in a middle school classroom library, but I just felt like it was only okay. She has, you know, some gruesome things that happen to her while she is trying to survive. So there's definitely like some darkness in this book. But I didn't love it. I just wasn't blown away by it. And then the last book I'm going to talk about is The Winter of the Witch, and this is the third and final book in the Winter Night trilogy by Katherine Arden. I am so excited that I was able to finish this book and finish this series and check that off my 2020 goals list, and I loved it. I gave this 5 out of 5 stars. I think my favorite really is the first book, but I loved the concept that this book brought in with the different worlds, and that's all I'm going to say. I thought that was fascinating. I really liked that. I thought the story was done in one point and that we would be moving on to the next point, but she was able to tie that together instead. It wasn't two separate things, which is what I thought she was going to do. And I'm not going to tell you what that was because that would spoil it. But those of you who have read it, you know what I'm referencing. But overall, I thought the series was fascinating. I thought it was really well written and I had great character arcs. Like the main character, Vasilisa, is very flawed, and I think that she's relatable and strong and driven, and I just think she's really fleshed out. And I really like her siblings. I loved this. I just thought this was so good. And that's it for all the books I read during the month of June. So I did fairly well. I ended up reading 12 books total. So I hope you like this. If you do, please give it a thumbs up. Don't forget to hit subscribe, and I'll be back with bookish videos soon. As always, keep reading.